The alley reeked of stale beer and desperation. It was a familiar scent, one that had clung to my clothes, my skin, my very soul for years. Today, it was mixed with something new, the metallic tang of my own blood. They'd left me for dead, as usual, only this time they'd done a better job of it. My vision was blurring, the asphalt a cold, rough pillow beneath my head. Distant sirens, a cynical lullaby, seemed to mock my fading consciousness. This was it then. The end of Michael Thorne, the punching bag, the freak, the one they all loved to hate. Then, a voice. It wasn't the sirens, or the distant city hum. It was a whisper, a hiss that seemed to slither directly into the raw, bleeding chambers of my mind. Such wasted potential. Such unfulfilled rage. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt weighted with lead. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the alley, coalescing into a form that was both impossibly tall and impossibly thin. It wasn't human, not truly. Its eyes, if they were eyes, gleamed like molten obsidian, reflecting the scattered moonlight. "Who are you?" I croaked, the words tasting like copper. The shadow chuckled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "A benefactor, my dear Michael. A connoisseur of grievances. And you, my friend, are a veritable feast of them." It knelt, though its limbs didn't seem to bend in any natural way. A long, slender finger, tipped with a nail like polished onyx, grazed my cheek. Where it touched, the burning pain of my wounds receded, replaced by a chilling calm. "They hurt you," the voice now a low, resonant thrum within my skull. "They broke you. They left you here to rot. And you crave retribution, don't you?" Retribution. The word echoed, resonating with every fractured bone, every bruised inch of my body. It was a longing so deep, so primal, that it dwarfed even the agony I was in. "Yes," I whispered, the single word of fervent prayer. "More than anything." "Then we have a deal," the shadow said, and a smile stretched its formless features, revealing teeth that were too many, too sharp. "Your life, which is fleeting, for power. The power to make them regret every single blow, every cruel word, every moment they made you feel less than human. You will rise. And they will fall." A shimmering darkness pulsed from its form, engulfing me. It wasn't cold, not exactly. It was more like a complete absence of sensation, a void into which my consciousness was rapidly dissolving. The last thing I felt was a searing burn, not of pain, but of something fundamentally shifting within me, like old circuits being rewired with a dark, potent energy. Then, nothing. I woke to the insistent, rhythmic beeping of a hospital monitor. White sheets, the antiseptic smell. I was alive. Not only alive, but different. My body felt lighter, stronger. The aches and pains that had been my constant companions for years were gone, replaced by a subtle hum of power just beneath my skin. A nurse bustled in, her face etched with surprise. "Mr. Thorne! You're awake! That's incredible," the doctor said. It was touch and go for a while. I tried to sit up, and found I could. My muscles responded with an effortless grace I'd never known. "What happened?" She hesitated. "You were found in an alley, severely beaten. They said you were lucky to be alive. Your injuries, they were extensive. But somehow, you've made a remarkable recovery." She eyed me suspiciously, as if expecting me to suddenly sprout wings. I knew what had happened. The shadow. The deal. Later that day, After a battery of bewildered doctors had pronounced me medically inexplicable, I walked out of the hospital. The sunlight felt different on my skin, no longer harsh, but invigorating. The world seemed sharper, colors more vibrant, sounds clearer. I could hear snippets of conversations from blocks away, discern individual footsteps amidst the city cacophony. My steps led me, unerringly, towards the familiar, dreaded path to my school. It was after hours, the building dark and silent, but I knew they'd be there. Jason, Mark, and Trent. My tormentors. My executioners. The back entrance to the school was always unlocked, a detail I knew all too well from countless hurried escapes. The air inside was cool, still, carrying the faint scent of stale gym socks and disinfectant. Every shadow seemed to stretch, deepen, and then retract as I passed. I moved with a new agility, my steps silent, almost predatory. I found them in the gym, as expected. They were shooting hoops, their laughter echoing through the cavernous space. Jason, the ringleader, tall and broad, his face a perpetual sneer. Mark, the sneering sycophant, always quick with a hurtful joke. And Trent, the quiet sadist, whose eyes held a disturbing glint of pleasure whenever he delivered a particularly nasty blow. They stopped when I entered, their faces shifting from careless amusement to surprise, then to a dawning, uncomfortable recognition. Thorn? Jason's voice was a low growl. What the hell are you doing here? I thought we taught you a lesson. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, but it felt cold, alien on my face. You did, I said, and my voice, to my own ears, sounded deeper, more resonant. You taught me a great many lessons. And now, it's my turn to teach. Trent scoffed. You think you're tough now, freak? We'll finish what we started. He took a step towards me, his fists clenching. That's when it happened. A surge of energy, hot and dark, pulsed through me. My vision sharpened, focusing on Trent. I saw the minute tension in his muscles, the subtle shift of his weight. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing me to perceive every nuance of his movement. I didn't move. Not really. It was more like an internal command, a thought, and Trent stumbled, his ankle twisting beneath him with a sickening crunch. He cried out, collapsing to the floor, clutching his leg. Jason and Mark stared, their faces a mixture of confusion and a flicker of fear. What was that? Mark stammered. A taste, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it seemed to fill the gym. A very small taste. Jason, ever the bully, recovered quickly. Get up, Trent. He's just messing with your head. We'll break him. He charged, a roaring freight train of muscle and fury. I stood my ground. As he lunged, I raised a hand, not to block, but to direct. A silent push, a focused will. Jason, mid-stride, suddenly veered sharply, his momentum carrying him not into me, but into the unpadded brick wall of the gym. The impact was sickeningly loud, a dull thud followed by a choked gasp. He crumpled to the floor, a dark stain spreading rapidly across the back of his head. He didn't move. Mark stared, his face ashen, eyes wide with horror. He looked from Jason's still form to me, and then, a guttural scream tore from his throat. He turned to run, scrambling towards the exit. I could have stopped him. I could have broken his legs, or snapped his spine with a thought. But a different urge, colder and more methodical, pulsed within me. Fear. I wanted to see him terrified. I wanted him to carry that terror with him, like a festering wound. "Run, Mark," I said, my voice echoing mockingly. "Run as fast as you can. Because tomorrow the game begins." He didn't need a second invitation. He burst through the doors and into the night, his terrified cries fading into the distance. I stood over Jason's body, the coppery scent of his blood a rich, intoxicating perfume. Trent was still on the floor, whimpering, clutching his shattered ankle, his eyes darting between me and Jason, raw terror contorting his face. "Don't worry, Trent," I said, kneeling beside him. My voice was calm, almost soothing. "You're not going anywhere. We have a lot of catching up to do." The next few days were a blur of transformation. The powers I possessed weren't just physical. My mind was sharper, my thoughts clearer. I could manipulate things with a mere glance, a focused intention. Objects, people, even shadows seemed to bend to my will. It was exhilarating, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. The deal with the devil. It wasn't a simple exchange. There was a constant whisper in the back of my mind, a dark hum that urged me on, pushing me to greater acts of vengeance, to darker corners of my newfound abilities. It felt like a part of me, a part that had always been there, suppressed, now unleashed. Trent, after I'd convinced him to stay, was a living testament to my awakening. He was locked in the abandoned storage room beneath the school, a place no one ever visited. I hadn't hurt him further, not yet. But I made sure he understood. I'd given him a minor injury, a warning, and he was already broken. The fear in his eyes, the constant whimpering, was a satisfying prelude. Mark, on the other hand, was still out there. And he was the next target. I found him at his house, huddled in his room, lights off, curtains drawn. He was a trembling mess, paranoid, flinching at every shadow. His parents, oblivious, probably thought he was just sick. I could sense his fear, taste it almost, a bitter tang in the air. I didn't need to break in. The window simply slid open at my silent command. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking faintly under my weight. Mark, huddled under his blankets, stiffened. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice a low, chilling whisper. He gasped, a small, choked sound. He pulled the blankets tighter, as if they could shield him from the encroaching darkness. "Thorn, no. Please. Please?" I chuckled softly. "Funny, I don't recall hearing that word much when you and Jason had me cornered. Or when you were kicking me while I was down. Or when you laughed while they carved my initials into my arm. I didn't need to see the mark on my arm anymore to feel the phantom sting. The memory, sharp and vivid, fueled the cold fire within me. I walked closer, my steps deliberately slow. Mark whimpered, shrinking further into his bed. "What do you want?" "Justice," I said simply. "And a little education." I reached out, and a small, antique music box on his dresser began to hum, its delicate melody warped into a discordant, grating shriek. The room grew cold, the air thick with an oppressive dread. Mark's teeth began to chatter. "Remember that time, Mark?" I continued, my voice calm, conversational. "When you rigged the basketball hoop to fall on me during practice? Only it hit old Mrs. Henderson instead. She broke her hip, remember?" He shook his head, his face contorted in a silent plea. "Oh, you remember," I said, and a thin, spectral hand, shimmering with dark energy, seemed to materialize from the shadows behind me, hovering over his bed. It wasn't truly there, not physically, but Mark saw it. He recoiled, his eyes wide with a primal terror. You always remembered, didn't you? You just didn't care. The room felt like it was shrinking, pressing in on him. The air grew heavy, making it difficult for him to breathe. He started to hyperventilate, shallow, gasping breaths. No! Please, Thorn, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry? I scoffed. Sorry doesn't bring back the nights I spent curled up, wishing I was dead. Sorry doesn't erase the scars. Sorry doesn't fix anything. I lifted my hand, and the spectral appendage mimicked the movement, reaching for Mark. It wasn't a physical touch, but he felt it, a cold, cloying sensation of dread seeping into his very bones. He screamed, a raw, animalistic sound, and thrashed in his bed, trying to escape the unseen terror. I held him there, not physically, but mentally. His mind was a tangled mess of fear and guilt, and I simply amplified it, turning his own anxieties into a living nightmare. I watched, dispassionately, as his body convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. His scream tapered off into a guttural gurgle. Then, he was still. His eyes were still wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, a silent scream frozen on his lips. His heart was still beating, a frantic flutter, but his mind was shattered. He would live, technically, but he would never be the same. He would exist in a perpetual state of terror, a prisoner of his own broken psyche. A living monument to his own cruelties. It was satisfying. Deeply, profoundly satisfying. But the voice, the dark hum within me, still whispered for more. The school was eerily quiet when I returned. The scent of ozone and something subtly acrid hung in the air from Mark's house. I descended into the forgotten depths of the storage room, the only light coming from a single, bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. Trent was curled in a fetal position, shivering, his injured ankle swollen and purplish. He looked up when I entered, his eyes darting frantically. Mark is indisposed, I said, my voice calm. He won't be bothering anyone ever again. Trent whimpered. What did you do? Nothing you didn't do to me, in your own way, I replied. Only I'm more efficient. I leaned against the wall, observing him. He was a broken thing already, a testament to what fear could do. But he was also the one who delighted in the quiet suffering of others, who always pushed for just one more kick, one more punch, even when Jason and Mark were done. Tell me, Trent, I said, my voice low and conversational. Do you remember the time you convinced Jason to hold me down while you experimented with the soldering iron on my hand? His eyes widened, and he tried to scramble back, pushing himself against the dusty wall. No. I don't remember. Please. Oh, but you do, I said, and the air around me shimmered, a distorted reflection of the flickering bulb. I remember every searing moment. Every single burn. I lifted my hand, and the faded scar, a jagged line across my palm, seemed to pulse with a faint, dark light. You liked it, didn't you, Trent? I continued, my voice growing colder, harder. You liked the smell of burning flesh. You liked hearing me scream. He was sobbing now, incoherent pleas tumbling from his lips. I'm sorry. Are you? I asked, stepping closer. Or are you just sorry you're caught? I raised my hand, and the shadow in the corner of the room detached itself, lengthening, stretching, coalescing into a formless, shifting entity. It was like living darkness, coiling and uncoiling. Trent stared at it, his eyes fixed in a terrified gaze. "You see that, Trent?" I said, my voice now a low growl. "That's your fear. That's your guilt. And it's hungry." The shadow pulsed, rippling towards him. Trent's cries intensified, turning into a frantic, desperate wail. He scrambled, trying to escape, but the injured ankle rendered him helpless. The shadow enveloped him, not physically, but like a suffocating blanket of dread. His screams were muffled, distorted, turning into gargles as he struggled against the invisible oppression. I watched, impassively, as his body contorted, his limbs twitching violently. His face, visible through the swirling darkness, was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes rolled back, and a thin trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't move anymore. The shadow dispersed, receding back into the corners of the room. Trent lay there, his body slack, his eyes wide and unseeing. He wasn't breathing. Silence descended upon the storage room, broken only by the rhythmic drip of a leaky pipe. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of fear and something else. Something final. I felt it then, a jolt, a surge of dark satisfaction that coursed through every fiber of my being. It was deeper, more profound than the satisfaction I'd felt with Mark. This was completion. But with it came a chilling realization. The hum within me, the dark whisper, was louder now, more insistent. It was no longer just about retribution. It was about power. And the thirst for it was insatiable. The days bled into weeks. News spread of Jason's bizarre accident and Mark's sudden, inexplicable catatonia. Trent, of course, was simply listed as a missing person. No one connected the dots. No one looked at Michael Thorne, the former victim, the invisible boy, and saw the predator. I walked the school halls, no longer shrinking from glances, but holding them. My presence commanded respect, or at least, a wary distance. The few remaining bullies, sensing a shift in the hierarchy, avoided my gaze, their bravado replaced by an unnerving deference. But the devil's bargain was a hungry thing. The whispers in my mind grew louder, more demanding. The initial satisfaction of revenge had faded, replaced by a hollow emptiness that only more power, more control, seemed to fill. The lines between right and wrong blurred, then vanished entirely. The people who had wronged me were gone, but the desire for power, for control, remained. I found myself experimenting, pushing the boundaries of my abilities. I could influence minds, twist perceptions, bend reality on a small scale. It was intoxicating. The world was my plaything, and I was the puppet master. One evening, I stood on the roof of the school, overlooking the slumbering town. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast long, distorted shadows. The wind, a cold, hungry sigh, tugged at my clothes. "You're insatiable, aren't you?" I whispered to the unseen presence within me. "Only fulfilling your deepest desires, Michael," the familiar hiss replied, a silken serpent coiling around my thoughts. "You wished for power. You wished for control. And now you have it. But what good is power if it is not exercised?" A chilling thought took root in my mind. The bullies were gone. But there were others. Those who had stood by, silent witnesses to my suffering. Those who had turned a blind eye. Those who had secretly relished my torment. The hum within me pulsed, a dark affirmation. They were not innocent. They, too, were complicit. And they too deserved to learn the true meaning of fear. The town below lay oblivious, bathed in the gentle glow of streetlights. A canvas, waiting for my brushstrokes. The deal was done. The payment was being exacted. And the game, for Michael Thorne, the victim, the predator, had only just begun. The darkness within me was no longer a foreign entity. It was me. And it was hungry.